Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Over the last few days, I've been spading the F-4EJ Phantom II. This is a Japanese Phantom, and it's not the one which is in a really awkward BR. It's actually the one that's at 11.0. It's not the Kai version, it's just the standard tech tree version. Now, some of you guys have probably played this thing, but as the premium, the F-4EJ ADTW. But obviously, as a standard tech tree vehicle, playing it means that you have to kind of research the modifications, so it's a little bit tougher to do to start with, but then you kind of get the rewards afterwards, getting the experience with the vehicle, and also getting the kind of bonuses to research from completing the modifications. And after I've played the F-4E, I played the F-4J, and also some of the other F-4s, I was kind of expecting a similar experience with this one. But I actually found that I had a better experience with this, but that's just because I had already played the F-4E, which is the 11.3 American one, which is slightly better than it, but has kind of the same cruxes as the F-4EJ, so I was able to play around them and be a bit more efficient of it. So what's the difference between the F-4E in the American tech tree and the F-4EJ? Basically, the F-4E has the leading edge slash, so it gets like the whole agile eagle thing, meaning that it can move around and is a lot better at turning. And then also, at the same time, it gets the AIM-7 E2 missile, which is the dogfighting Sparrow, which is basically the main one that you use on the vehicle. So the F-4EJ gets slightly worse missiles in the form of the AIM-9Ps, which are basically the Js, and then also the AIM-7Es instead of the E2s. So that's why it's a lower BR than the F-4E. It's not as good at turning, but also it gets worse semi-active missiles. But pretty much everything else is kind of the same. One of the cool things that this vehicle does get is EEGs on the cannons, meaning that once you get a radar lock on a vehicle, it actually works pretty well. So the biggest problem I had when I grinded out the F-4E for America was trying to get the radar to cooperate. The NAPQ 120 on the F4s is one of those which doesn't have a PD mode, it only just has a standard search mode, and when I played it, I wasn't exactly that knowledgeable in how to actually kind of use the radar along with the semi-actives and be able to destroy kind of the ground clutter that can be an issue. With the F-4EJ, since I have a lot of experience now using this radar and also just using other radars, I actually felt very comfortable using it and realized how to actually play this thing, which is how I ended up playing the F-4E. What you have to do is stay low to the ground, like most jets of this area, since if you get up-tiered, you basically face stuff that's just better than you, with better missiles and better radars, and then you use the ground to be able to defend yourself against semi-actives. Your main weapons are the gun and the AIM-9Ps, and then if anybody pops up from the ground, so if they decide to do a loop in a dogfight against somebody else, or if there's somebody who's coming from up high, then you point the nose up and you hammer them with a missile, and then go down again, maintaining speed, and then continue to go fast on the ground, and never to go slow. Never, ever turn unless you are in a one-on-one and you feel like you can beat the vehicle. Because the vast majority of the time, when you turn in this thing, you're kind of done for. There's a lot better turn fighters that are at this BR, and also your main advantage against a lot of vehicles is the J79, G17 engines, meaning that you can go incredibly fast and you can reset the battle and then use your missiles again, and then the gun in head-ons. So the vehicle, what I ended up using on it is 4 AIM-7Es, 4 AIM-9Ps, the 20mm of course, and then the external fuel tank, because this thing burns through fuel at a ridiculous rate since it has the two massive guzzling engines. You also have to be a little bit careful nowadays at these BRs because you will actually run into IRCCM missiles, the IRs, and since this thing burns so hot, once they're fired at you, it's pretty much impossible to stop them, even with as many countermeasures as you feel like, and also trying to turn away from the missiles. You'll see the R-73 from the Su-39, and you'll also see the Magic 2 from stuff like the Jaguar IS, which is just a pain. I don't know how else to put it. But everything else you can kind of countermeasure off. I just ran flares, and it was working pretty well. Nowadays, around these BRs, since there are vehicles that use semi-actives like the F-4EJ and like stuff like the J37C, what I ended up doing is still running all flares and then just kind of used my abilities to kind of dodge the semi-actives instead of having to use countermeasures. This works most of the time as long as you keep speed, which gives you the energy to be able to maneuver, but it doesn't work every time, which is a bit of an issue. Now, when we have a look at some other factors of the vehicle, it does have access to a bunch of bombs and rockets and stuff like that. And I remember when I started spading the F4s, one of the things that people told me was like, oh, well, you know, you're going to have to basically just use the bombs because it's not a very fun time. But with the F-4EJ, I actually found it not too bad to be able to grind through. We got very lucky in some of the early games. We had some pretty good teams that helped us out. And then also, I really enjoy the 20mm Vulcan. It's one of those that's great and head-on. Very good high velocity, a lot of ammunition as well, and it's just great for chasing targets. So I was able to do quite a lot of good stuff with that. And then also at the same time, if you have a look at the modifications, you have a straight line down, which is all of the missiles. So you start off with the classic 2 AIM-9Es, which let's say is not great, but if you stay low to the ground and kind of play the way that I talked about, you can get some gun kills, and then you can start going through the ranks. And then you get the AIM-9Ps, which are obviously quite a lot better than the E's, but still not fantastic, but they're good enough for 11-0. And then you start unlocking the Sparrows, which you can then start using that little trick that I talked about where you stay low to the ground, wait for people to pop, put up your nose, you know, use the ACM to be able to target them, and then bang, hit them with the AIM-7s when they're going slow. The AIM-7Ds I found completely worthless, though. These semi-actives are weak. They don't like doing anything. They don't overload greatly. They don't seem to do quite a lot. And what's kind of funny is if you actually have a look at the AIM-7D and the AIM-7E, basically all of the stats are pretty much the same, apart from the overload and also the lock range and launch range on them. But this is why I think it's super important to actually have a look at kind of external sources. There's a really good spreadsheet out there which talks about all of like the missile characteristics, because if you just had a look at the D and the E, you'd think, oh, well, the only difference is that one turns a bit better. But there are other functional differences between them. And the D, as I said, was pretty much worthless. It wasn't very fun at all, didn't really work. The E, though, started working very well. And it meant that I could catch people off guard. It meant that I could set up destructions, which was really nice and made it work pretty well. One of the problems I also had when I actually played the F4E was at 11.3, 12.0 was kind of the meta. You had a bunch of F4Ss, everybody was playing the F4S, and that was just, you know, the thing that everybody was doing. But nowadays, with the addition of the Hornets, and it seems like everybody and their mother buying it, this actually meant for me, it was a lot nicer. I ended up playing a lot more 11.3 matches, 11.7 matches. The biggest issue was stuff like MiG-23 MLDs and, you know, MLAs and stuff like that. But generally, it was actually quite nice. The meta felt a lot more stable, and that's literally because there weren't as many F4Ss, you know, pushing you into full up tiers that you fought. When I did have those matches, it wasn't very fun. It wasn't enjoyable because you're basically just facing better versions of yourself. But all of the other times, I felt like I had some kind of advantage that I could, you know, face off at. So it's actually been really nice playing this thing because of that. The matchmaking was a lot nicer. And also at the same time, the same I think happened with the F5E FCU, which is the other kind of vehicle in the Japanese tree that I spaded recently. It just made it feel a lot better. So with this F-4EJ Phantom, we ended up playing 48 battles in it to spade it, 63% win rate and 108 air kills to 31 deaths. So for me, that's pretty good stats in the good old Phantom. And I would say after we were going like maybe like 1.5 to 1 until we got the full missile loadout, until we were able to start banging, and then stuff started picking up and we started doing quite a lot of stuff, and then it became really fun. This was another vehicle that I spaded during the Meteor event. We're basically doing like one every like 1.5 days, and it's pretty crazy how quickly you can get through these things. I still think, though, just looking at all of these vehicles, they really need to start reducing the modification cost on a lot of them because they're crazy expensive compared to a lot of others. Basically, in order to spade out the F-15JM, which is, of course, the Japanese top F-15, or even the Gripen, which is now in the tech tree, it is pretty much the same modification cost in order to spade out the F-4EJ Phantom, which is just silly. Like, that just seems wrong. So hopefully at some point we get some reductions, hopefully after these BR changes, and then we can have a bit more fun with these vehicles. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.